If you are a property investor in Australia and you're thinking about buying a property under a trust, or you already have a few properties under a trust and you're thinking, man, what does my current setup look like compared to the best in the world? What am I not doing in my trust that the best in the world is doing? What does the ultimate Mount Everest trust look like? Well, today, let's look at the Murdoch family trust. And as we dive into the rabbit hole of old mate Rupert Murdoch's family trust, we find some juicy mistakes that you should avoid. Keep watching because it's gonna get juicy. Now let's first boil down the mechanics of this family trust. We have old mate over here, the director of the trust, and then you have the beneficiaries down there, the 6 beneficiaries, his kids. But then out of the 6 kids, not all kids are made equally. We have Patricia Booker, which is the first wife, married in 1956, divorced in 1967. Then we have Anna Torv, married in 1967, divorced in 1999. Then we have Asian Fever Wendy Deng, married in 1999, divorced in 2013. Then we have Jerry Horrell, married in 2016 and divorced in 2022, and no kids from her because old mate at that age was shooting blanks. Now, before we look at Mr. Rupert Murdoch's family trust, I want to let you guys know before you set up a family trust, there's actually 2 types of trusts that you can set up, which is a family trust with a corporate trustee, or number 2, a family trust with an individual trustee, and there is a difference. Now, with old mate over here, his trust name is called Murdoch Family Trust, and he's chosen a corporate trustee family trust, and the corporate trustee is called Cruden Investment Limited. So to visually draw out the structure of his family trust, we have the Murdoch Family Trust over here, and then the corporate trustees under it, which is the Cruden Investment Limited. And then this company, the corporate trustee, acts as a vehicle to control News Corp and Fox Corp, and a bunch of these other companies that he also owns, besides 21st Century Fox, which was bought out by Disney. Ching, Mr. Rupert Murdoch. Now, keeping it simple and keeping it basic so we can learn about Mr. Murdoch's family trust. The reason why he didn't choose an individual trustee and chose a corporate trustee instead is because the key feature that one would choose a corporate trustee over individual trustee is for this keyword over here called continuity. Because when you set up a family trust under a corporate trustee, the company can never die, whilst under individual trustee, it ends upon that person's death. Now, before I continue, no pun intended, I want to make it very clear the corporate trustee is not the ownership of the family trust, okay? The corporate trustee holds the legal title to the trust assets, but this is not the same as ownership. The trustee holds these assets for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And these beneficiaries over here, they have equitable interest in the trust assets, meaning they are entitled to the benefits from the trust as specified by the trust deed. Now, this is where it gets interesting and juicy. The trust deed sets out what will happen to the ownership of the media assets upon Murdoch's death. His voting share will be transferred to the 4 oldest children. That could lead to a scenario in which the children are fighting over the future of the media assets. But wait, you might say, Q, you said he had 6 kids. Let me show you something. This is a very simple diagram I made on Word on Rupert Murdoch's family trust. As you can see here, he has the trust set up. And obviously under here is the corporate trustee, but it is broken down into voting rights and non-voting rights beneficiaries. As you can see under voting rights, the 4 oldest children, Lachlan, James, Elizabeth, and Prudence, have voting rights to his trust and assets. But his 2 other daughters, Chloe and Grace Murdoch, which is produced by his 3rd ex-wife, Wendy Deng, they unfortunately, dang it, have non-voting rights compared to their other stepbrothers and stepsisters. Now, the biggest difference between voting rights and non-voting rights, aside from the fact that these 6 children have access to the financial benefits of the trust, is that the 4 children that have voting rights have control and decision-making and influence. And this is critical, guys. Examples of decision making, for example, old mate Clark said these guys have choices in terms of investment choices, trustee appointments and removals, amendments to the trust terms and distribution schedules, which means Lachlan, James, Elizabeth and Prudence have active roles in the governance and management of the family trust, whilst Grace and Chloe have passive roles, which in layman terms, according to old mate's ex-wife Wendy Dang, means do the nothing but get the money with what's left over. And what is left over really depends on the power struggle between Lachlan Murdoch and James Murdoch. which in this woke society will criticize old mate for being too old school and being gender biased and patriarchal. Because at the end of the day, Prudence and Elizabeth, you guys don't have any dicks. And this is where it gets juicy. Out of the two dicks that would jizz over his empire, Mr. Old Mate over here is gonna leave Lachlan in charge. He's gonna dish James and put Lachlan, the bigger dick, in charge. Now here's the masterful thing you need to learn from old mate Mr. Murdoch over here when set up your own family trust. Besides Grace and Chloe, because those were seeds from his Asian fever days, his 4 legit kids, Prudence, Elizabeth, Lachlan and James, were all given equal voting rights. But the ultimate goal of Mr. Murdoch was to favour his 2 boys, Lachlan and James. But old mate was always pitting these 2 against each other. He knew if one of them didn't listen, he will downgrade their voting rights. In 2024, James has been kind of naughty, leftist views, he doesn't like it. Old mate's old school. He likes the conservative view held by Lachlan, and therefore he's got to upgrade his rights and move him up the chain to control all this stuff. So if you watched thus far, these are the 3 things you can take away from Rupert Murdoch's family trust setup. Number 1, put your kids as beneficiaries. In that way, you can pit them against each other. This fosters competition amongst them and also fosters worthiness of leadership. Despite the emotional trauma caused to your kids, who cares? Because the company vision trumps family unity. Which leads to the second point. Understand what is your empire. For example, this trust owns a bunch of properties, or this trust also tied to your company. What is the company's vision? For example, old mate Murdoch over here, he holds a conservative view. And even though James has been working tirelessly to build up his empire, since James swayed and changed his view to be more leftist, he dropped him and picked up Lachlan. Which leads to the third benefit of setting up a trust with so many beneficiaries is that you always have a backup. Especially when you're succession planning, and for example, the first choice, which is James, didn't work out well, you can always choose a backup, which is Lachlan, which is now the favorite child. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the ultimate benefit of why Mr. Murdoch set up a family trust. Because out of the 6 over here, yes, Lachlan might be the preferred successor at the moment. But remember, the director of the trust, which might be you of the trust, can always change your mind. Remember James? He was previously preferred over Lachlan. Now, what if in the next few years Lachlan doesn't play ball? Maybe Prudence, maybe Elizabeth, or maybe our Asian sisters Chloe and Grace has a chance. Either way, you, the director of the trust, or Mr. Murdoch, old mate over here, holds the ultimate power to decide before he cocks it. Now, despite the ultimate obvious flaw of setting up a trust this way, which means your kids really hate the crap out of you and there's emotional trauma amongst the beneficiaries, this is the most lethal fucking Jedi way of setting up a trust, where you use your kids to build up your freaking empire for you. Hats off to you, Mr. Rupert Murdoch. You are the Darth Vader of family trust. Jump in the comments. Let me know what you think.